Hello, everyone, and welcome to the March Peer-in-Peer event by Exocell Bio. We're very excited today. We have a great agenda for you, and I will just wait a few moments to let you all join and get situated. Again, you're joining the Exocell Bio March Peer-to-Peer event. We have a great agenda going. I will just place that slide up so you can see it. So throughout the presentation, you have the opportunity to ask questions. We have a Q&A button that should be on Zoom that we'd like you to use to submit any questions. There's also the chat feature, but if possible, questions for the marketing presentation or for the case studies ideally should be placed in the Q&A section of Zoom. And all right, just giving everyone another minute to get situated. All right, we'll get going slowly with the agenda. So first up, I'm actually going to be speaking about marketing a regenerative medicine practice successfully. Then I'll have time for some open Q&A. We'll go to our first case study with Dr. Shantala, which is an aesthetic case study, aesthetic medicine. And then we have our second case study with Dr. Thomas Redner, which is actually about liver fibrosis. Did I say that right? So, and we also have the patient here himself who will be giving a live testimonial with Dr. Redner. And then we will open up for a peer-to-peer discussion, question and answer with Dr. Schechter we have, and all of the our MDs that are here today. And lastly, for everyone that's attending this webinar, we have a special promotion exclusive for you that we will announce at the end. So without further ado, let's get started. So, marketing a successful regenerative medicine practice. So, hello, I'm Risa. I'm the one speaking to you about this today. My marketing company is called Goldman Marketing Group, and we work exclusively in the healthcare space, helping doctors and medical practices all around the country best recruit new patients, keep patients retained, and increase the value of their patients. So I'm going to try and teach you some of the best practices that I have learned over my 18 years of experience in this field. So first up, I think it's important to remember that marketing really is the key to a successful practice. If we've learned anything with COVID, it's that marketing is actually not what you cut when you're worried about expenses. It's actually something to invest in because it's really the best avenue you have for growth. And the other piece of advice that I feel like is something I always need to say is you do get what you pay for. I know there is a lot of different options out there in the world of marketing companies and people. And I do want to just say that in general, just like with medicine and with patients, you generally get what you pay for. So keep that in mind when you're researching who to use. So new patient acquisition, that's the big question, right? Everyone's always wondering, how do I drive new patients to my practice? Well, I would say there are three main sources that you should think about, and all of your patients will come from one of these three main areas. One is your internet presence. So maybe your Google or your website or online reputation, like your Yelp scores or your Google reviews. That's the first. The second is word of mouth, patient referrals. We all know that's a great avenue for new patients. And the third is doctor referrals. So with that in mind, do you know what percentage of your practice comes from each? If not, I think it's really important to start monitoring this. It can be done on your patient intake form when your staff asks for where the patient heard about you so that you can run reports and better understand where your patients are finding you. And if you use marketing correctly, referrals that come from online, they say you found you on Google or your website, really can be actually more than 50% of all the new patients coming to your practice. So if you are anything less than that, there is opportunity to improve. The next area of marketing is that I think it's important to consider three main buckets. One, attracting new patients. That's really the area of marketing that everyone always thinks about. It's the most obvious, but it's really just, it's no more important than the other two. The second is to increase your per patient revenue. That's just called working smarter and not harder. It's not only about the quantity of patients, but about the quality of the patients. And if you're able to increase your per patient revenue, it usually can amount to more revenue at the end than just driving new patients to your practice. And number three, retaining patients. In almost every medical specialty, except a couple surgical ones, there is no reason that your patients shouldn't stay with you for life. They should come back, whether it's for Botox every couple months, whether it's for a check-in annually, a skin check, whatever it is, you want to retain your patients. And if you can maximize these three areas of marketing, that's really how you develop a really successful strategy. So again, the same three areas I was just talking about: recruiting patients, retaining patients, and converting patients. They together will lead to your annual growth revenue goals. So what should your marketing plan look like? Well, that's the million-dollar question. And usually marketing plans are very long and detailed. And there's a lot of pieces and a lot of different elements that different practices might need. But no matter who you are and what you're doing, the 5 that I have up on the screen right now are definitely your most important areas to focus on. 1, a state-of-the-art website. 2, SEO, which stands for search engine optimization. 3, email marketing. 4, online reputation. And 5, social media. And I'm going to go through each of these in depth a little bit to try and give you a couple tips, tricks, and pearls for each area so that you can maybe go back and reflect on your own practice and see where you might be able to improve. So first, let's talk about your website. So how important is your website? If I could see you all, I'd ask you to all raise your hand with how important you think it is. But since I can't, I'll just assume you're all saying, yes, we know it's very important. But in truth, it is. It's the foundation of your entire marketing strategy. I really recommend not spending much money to do anything until your website is high quality and how you would like it to be. 75% of all new patients will Google you before making an appointment. Whether a doctor referred them to you, their mom told them, their best friend, they're still going to Google you. So that's why your website is extremely important. And like I said earlier, at least 50% of all your new patients should be saying they found you online. That's how important your website should be. Your website is, of course, your first impression. This is before they're even going to call on the phone. A lot of people think the front desk is the first impression, but it's actually this online presence. So there's a lot to say about the perceived value that comes along with having a high quality website. You want to provide education. This is not just promotion. You are a physician and you are providing medical education to help support people. Not enough to teach them how to treat themselves at home, of course. You don't need to be, Wikipedia, but enough so that they can feel confident in your skills to call and make an appointment. And lastly, your website is your foundation for SEO. Because of that, I highly recommend, if you are hiring a company to build your website, that is the same company that's going to be doing your SEO. I have seen many times if you use a different firm for each, there's actually a lot of disconnect happening because your SEO, about, I'd say 50% of the success of your strategy is built into the foundation of your website. How fast does it load? What's the metadata? How is the sitemap structured? How are the funnels for patients to get through, and so many other features. What are a few website best practices? Well, mobile first. What does that mean? It means not only should your website be responsive, which we've known now for years, but it actually should be built with mobile first in mind. So when someone sends you a new website to look at, or you're looking at your own website, pick up your phone, look on your phone. How does it look? Because that's by far how most people are looking at your website, not on a desktop computer. Second, if you are an aesthetic physician, you need to have a photo gallery. You don't want before and after photos just on the corresponding procedure pages. You should have a standalone gallery. And if you do, and you look at the analytics, I guarantee you it will probably be the #1 place that patients go. Patients a lot of times don't want to read, they just want to see the results. So let them find your photo gallery easily. Next is movement. This is a trend that came up a year or two ago, but I think it adds a lot to the perceived value. It's a very easy thing to do. And whether you have moving video or text sliding in, just these little extra elements add a level of quality and expertise that people will think means the doctor is also at that level. Next, speed. Have you ever gone to a website and it takes too long to load? It's so frustrating. Probably you will click off, go back to the Google search and click on the next one down the list. So you definitely need to make sure your website loads very quickly. There's a lot of ways to do that. Your web and tech teams can help you with it, but that's very important. People have no attention span these days. And finally, content is king. If you've ever heard that phrase before, it's because it's very meaningful for SEO, but it is a true statement. Your website should be full of content, full of education, maybe even 800 plus words per page. This is so Google sees it as a robust website and will rank it. And so there's actually some substance there for patients when they come visit your website. Next, your website should definitely have multiple ways to contact you. Of course, it's the goal to not just educate people, but to help them actually find you and make an appointment. So how do you do that? Well, a static phone number is something I recommend. Static means as you scroll on the website, the phone number always stays at the top. Same with a contact form. At the very top in your menu bar should be a contact button, make an appointment form, something like that that's always present. So no matter where they are on your site, they can access it. Next, I highly recommend online booking. It's definitely the future. Patients love it. COVID has allowed, more opportunity for people to get what they want when they want it. And if a patient wants to make an appointment at 8 p.m., let them make an appointment at 8 p.m. I know it can seem overwhelming for online booking because you may have a very, unique scheduling system or room situation in your practice. So to start, you could just start by allowing new patient consultations to book online. That's generally where I advise people to start. Once that works, then maybe you can start adding one other service on top of that. The next is online chat. Again, it's a great way for patients to be able to interact with your staff, and it actually will take your staff less time than if they called. And it's better than email because it's in the moment. So I'd highly recommend, there's so many great HIPAA compliant apps that you can add to your website. And lastly is two-way texting. People love to text these days. They don't all want to email, and they certainly don't want to call. Who even calls people anymore on the phone? So definitely a system for HIPAA compliant two-way texting is highly recommended. I guarantee you will see more responsiveness than when you're emailing or trying to call patients. So next, let's talk about original photography. I know this might seem like it's not really relevant for marketing, but I think it is. I think that when you have professional photo shoot done, these are just some examples of some images, it exudes a very high quality feeling to your website. And it's so much better, that's me. It's so much better than a stock photo as well. So hire a local photographer to come in, do a photo shoot, get a super professional headshot, a group photo for a practice. There's so many fun ways to do photos. And I really think that this will set your website apart from everyone else who's just going onto stock photos and typing in beautiful woman and putting that person on the front page of their website. Next up, before and after photos. I know it's hard to get. Almost every practice in the country has problems getting before and after photos. It's hard to get the angles right. It's hard to get a patient to consent. Sometimes it's hard to see the results because they're subtle and it's hard to capture on camera. There's 10,000 reasons why it's hard. So my advice is that when you do take them, make sure you take them well. For example, this patient had a phenomenal result, but this angle is so terrible, I really can't even appreciate it. Here's another one. Again, she had a great rhinoplasty, but what do you see? You just look at her eye that's partially closed. That's really where your eye goes. Here again, angles, we're completely unable to realize the great results. This one, lighting, people can't look beyond the skin tone difference. This one, her hair's in her face. We'd like to see the face, so make sure the patient's hair is out of their way. Here's another example of angles. Here's some examples of good photos. This is a very consistent before and after. Lighting, angle, and everything. And it helps you realize the results. You really only look at the results here. Here's another example of consistency. I wish even she was wearing the same undergarments. But these are examples. This is an example of cropping. Sometimes if you're showing a before and after photo, you need to tell the eye where to look. So for this patient, because she had so much pigmentation and this client didn't treat it, we cropped into the neck area so that you're looking at the actual right area and not at how many freckles and what her sun damage is. Here's another example to really crop in up close. And lastly, markups can also be helpful. Here, many of you that are watching are physicians, so you might see the results, but other patients might need a little bit of a markup, like an indicator, an arrow to really show what they're looking at. I may have even recommended some sort of line here because, you know, to really emphasize the jawline that was changed. You really need to make it easy for people. Make sure to take off accessories from patients. This patient's shirt and her earrings are a little distracting. Here she's wearing a hair bonnet, here she's not. And it's a little frustrating because these results are incredible, yet these little things are kind of pulling it back from being the best photo that it could. This is one of my favorite before and afters of all time. It's very consistent. I don't think there's anything distracting in it other than the results. And this, of all the clients that I've worked with, is the most popular before and after that I've ever shared in my entire career on social media. And I think that that's why. It's believable. So let's talk about SEO. What does SEO mean? It means if you Google best hair loss doctor near me, who comes up first on Google? So you should try that. Go to Google, type in a few terms that you would like people to search to be able to find you and see, are you on page 1? You all know no one looks beyond page 1. So you really need to be on page 1 and even more importantly on the top of page 1. You also can look at the little ads that are at the top. Who's paying for those ads? Some of your competitors? Would you maybe want to get ahead of them? If you want to play that game? Those are all important things to look at. SEO involves a ton of components. This is a little diagram showing the different areas, but it's really quite complicated. And what I want to emphasize mostly is that most SEO firms are focusing on backlinking only because it's the cheap, dirty, easy way to do SEO. But in truth, it's not the best way. It is for sure one component of it, but really content is extremely important. Keyword research, blogging, videos, the way your site was programmed. There's so much more into it. So make sure to ask your SEO teams what they're actually doing for SEO. And if it doesn't include regular blogging and content, then you're missing the mark somewhere. So a couple tips and tricks about SEO. SEO without content and a good website is wasteful. I don't think it's a good use of money. Good SEO, it takes at least 3 to 6 months to start seeing results. So you need to be patient. And ultimately, key conversions are most important. So while most SEO firms talk about the increased traffic or your keyword rankings, at the end of the day, you need to see an increase in calls and email inquiries. That's how you know if your SEO is working, not on your keywords or your website traffic, but your conversions. And you might ask about pay-per-click. I do recommend pay-per-click until your organic SEO is sufficient to provide enough leads to your practice to keep you happy. So only for a short period of time. It's basically Google AdWords. If you are going to do pay-per-click, you need to make sure you have a custom landing page. This is one example. It needs to be very targeted, no other areas to click on, just front and center, contact me. And you definitely need to use a tracking phone number to make sure that you're tracking all of those leads, especially since you are literally paying per click. I wish I could see you guys, but if you have questions, please feel free to start putting them in the Q&A. All right, finishing up here, we have email marketing. So best practices, make sure that you collect emails for every single patient that comes in your door. Everyone has a patient now. Even the old grandmas have one. If not, they'll give you their daughter's email or their son. So make sure you get an email. I would make it a required field in your practice management software, so it's not possible for your staff to not gather one. Number 2, when you're sending emails, send them out with the doctor's name versus your practice name. You're going to get a lot more opens that rate, and it seems more personal. 3, mobile first. Again, when you're looking at email blasts, make sure to pick up your phone and look how they look on your mobile phone, because that's how your patients will receive them most likely. Next, I think 1 e-blast a week is sufficient. You don't want to send too many more than that. Otherwise, you'll have people start opting out. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning, I have found to be the most successful days to send an e-blast. You definitely want to keep in mind how much you're sending out that's promotional versus educational. You do not want to only be sending promotional e-blasts. You need to be complementing it with education. And most importantly, your subject line is king. It doesn't matter how beautiful your e-blast is if people don't open it. So you need to make sure your subject line is something that's going to entice people to want to open it, but not too much that it gets caught by the spam filters. I could do a whole nother webinar on that. If you'd like to discuss it more, I'd be happy to offline. Email marketing is really effective for reactivating old patients. If it's possible to run a report in your practice and look at who hasn't been back in more than 1 year, in more than 2 years, you could develop a campaign just for them to target them. Maybe they haven't been back in a year because of COVID. So then maybe you could re-emphasize your COVID safety protocols. If they haven't been back in 2 or 3 years, then maybe they've gone elsewhere, or maybe they just need to hear about what's new in your practice and some of the newer procedures. I also think it's great to remind patients using recall when they're due for a visit. For example, anyone that has Botox, if you're an aesthetic practice, should get an automated reminder at about 3.5 months that they're going to be due and should make their appointment to come back in. Start with those reminders, and then later, if they don't make an appointment, you could move to small incentives with a discount or money off if they book. These are low-hanging fruits, and it's far easier and less expensive than driving new patients to your practice. And my last piece of advice about email marketing is to help upsell and convert existing patients. So if it's possible in your database to separate out, for example, if you are a cosmetic practice, you might do some medical and some cosmetic. If it's possible to separate those databases, you could go after the medical patients with the soft introduction to cosmetic services, and you could go to the cosmetic patients with a soft introduction about your medical procedures and treatments that you offer in the office. I would start with a did you know type of email. Did you know we offer this? You'd be surprised how many of your patients don't understand the full scope of your practice. Even if you have a menu of services, it's not obvious to the average person what everything is possible to do in your practice. All right, online reputation. I'll try and go a little bit more quickly. I recommend Googling yourself regularly, making sure you have at least 20 Yelp reviews with 4.5 stars, at least 50 Google reviews with 4.5 stars. I highly recommend patient satisfaction surveys so you can learn where you can improve. And automation is the only way I have found is successful to ask patients to leave you a review. What do you do with the dreaded negative review, Risa? I don't want to tell people about Yelp because then they're going to leave a negative review. Well, I know Yelp can be frustrating and it's a pain point for a lot of us, but it's not going anywhere. It's an important avenue and it's here to stay. So I recommend that you respond, you engage, you reach out to those patients. What can you do? What can you learn from them? Patient satisfaction surveys can also help you learn. And in truth, you should take what you learn and bring it back in for your practice management, your operations, whatever it is, to try and fix the underlying issue to prevent more negative reviews in the future. Yelp advertising. I see I am missing a Y here, but I do recommend Yelp advertising. I find it has a very low cost per lead. I love it because it's month to month, no long-term contracts. And I highly recommend you use a certified Yelp agency because they have access to more tracking and tools than just a regular Yelp sales rep. And lastly, social media. Instagram and Facebook are the two most important platforms to focus on. I know everyone's talking about TikTok right now, and yes, it can be successful for some people, but Instagram and Facebook are your bread and butter, and you have to be good there first. It's better if you can have a profile as yourself, as a person, than a practice. If you think about it, all the biggest names in healthcare that are on social media are a specific person, not a brand or a practice. You need to be genuine and authentic, and you need to be highly engaged, posting multiple times a day, every day, if you really want it to be successful. So Risa, what do you think about Facebook ads? Well, in truth, I think Facebook advertising or Instagram advertising is best for an impulse purchase. So if you sell skincare, for example, it would be great. I have not personally found a lot of success with using it to promote a medical procedure or a condition, partially because of the Facebook advertising rules and regulations, like you can't use a before and after photo, but also because that's a bigger decision. Real self, I do think can work if you're in one of the aesthetic specialties that I listed here. And best practices for your social media, make sure it's branded. It looks nice, especially if you're in aesthetic practice. It should be professional, personal, use a lot of video, and have good variety. Okay, so how do you make sure all that's working? Say you do all those things. Is it working? Is it not? Am I getting a good bang for my buck? Well, it normally takes multiple points of contact to get a patient into your practice. So email marketing, for example, is not a one-off thing. It's not only alone going to work. You need to track everything and understand that there's many pieces that are going to be involved to bring someone to your practice. You should be looking at Google Analytics. You should set up Google Alerts. You should look at your website load time. You should definitely look at your monthly email inquiries and your monthly phone calls using a tracking phone number. Those are the most important KPIs. Well, I guess a Google Alert is not a KPI, but the other four are that you should be tracking. This is a little case study from an email marketing campaign for a cosmetic dermatology practice. We sent out 3 email journeys just a few months ago. We received about 15,000 opens, 2,000 clicks to the website, 81 calls, and 74 email inquiries. We took all of that and tracked 78 actual booked appointments out of it, led to over $85,000 in revenue. Definitely a good ROI from a $3,000 marketing spend. And here is another little case study of a facial plastic surgery practice. Again, we're tracking all the different areas where leads come in, and you can visually see that we are growing month after month, year after year. You see the considerable drop right when COVID happened, but they've rebounded beautifully. You need to have something like this for your practice to look at on a regular basis.